we know Bernd is one of the top traders with FTMO, so not surprisingly, this strategy looked to work pretty well. So yeah, thanks for joining today. Excited to go over this Bernd strategy model with you. We've done a few videos now. Those of you that have kind of watched the recent videos, we've got quite a few on YouTube now, but we've done 2 videos already based on this strategy. First off, we did a test on ES based on the S&P for this kind of Globex strategy, and then we did an optimization video kind of looking at a few different things that we could maybe tweak and improve the results. And now we've kind of learned from this strategy that it doesn't have the most trades. Let me actually grab the export, because when we did this last, I think it was right here. It was profitable, but there's not like a ton of trades. I think it was this was like a 3.5 month period or something. It was like 6 to 7 trades a month, and a lot of you were like, that's not enough trades. I would get bored if I was just trading this. So this is a really good model that we can maybe test a few different assets, and if this is a strategy that you guys want to trade, I encourage you to backtest on different indices. This is specifically for indices during New York session, but we're going to test the Dow today and see if we can get similar or at least profitable results to see if the Dow is also something worth taking a look at. But yeah, let's kind of review the strategy briefly, and if you guys have questions at any point, feel free to just mention in the chat. I've got it pulled up for you guys. But I did go over this in depth in the previous video, so I'll go a little quicker today, but just at least want to do a quick review. So again, we're going to be using the 5-minute time frame during New York session, and today specifically we're going to be testing on the Dow. I'm going to use the US30. If you trade futures, YM is the futures pair you could also test. And kind of some definitions. There's this Globex high and low, which essentially is the kind of electronic trading hours after New York session closes, between 6 p.m. Eastern and 9:30 a.m. Eastern the next day. You kind of have like a Globex period that Bernd defines, and we're going to be using those kind of highs and lows from that period for our testing. Let's zoom this in a little bit so you can see a little better. We've got supply and demand zones that we're going to be using, and I've got a couple kind of graphics in this strategy PDF. So for supply, there's kind of 2 different formations we'll be looking at. First off, you kind of have an uptrend. He calls it a rally-based drop. You'll be kind of moving to the upside, consolidate a little bit, and then move to the downside. So a rally-based drop. And he'll basically draw the supply zone from the lowest kind of indecision candle body before it moves down, and then the top will just be kind of the highest wick. And then there's also a drop-based drop. So it's on a downtrend. We're consolidating indecision for a little bit, and then continue to the downside. So again, he uses the body, the lowest body of those kind of indecision candles before it moves down, and uses the wick high of that kind of supply. And then vice versa for demand, we have a drop-based rally. So price moves down, consolidates, and then shifts to the upside. He will use the kind of highest body in this case before price kind of starts moving with like decisive candles to the upside, using the wick low as the kind of bottom of the demand zone. And then similarly, rally-based rally, price moves up, consolidates, and then continues using the body high before price kind of decides it's moving to the upside. And there are a few rules with these supply and demand zone rules. We don't want more than 6 candles in these kind of indecision zones. And the main reason for that is if you think about orders being filled, the less time that it spends in these kind of supply and demand zones, the fewer orders that are able to be filled in that time. So we want it to be relatively quick before it kind of moves to the downside. So there's, more unfilled orders left up here. So there can't be more than 6 candles in these supply or demand zones. We also want to see kind of a impulsive move departure from the zone. So when I did the backtest, this was like, it wasn't always the clearest, but kind of just like, does it pass the eye test? Does it actually start moving up significantly? If you want a really mechanical rule, I think I suggested maybe 2 or more impulsive candles of the same color could be like a more mechanical way to interpret that. And then if there's 2 zones right on top of each other, like if you kind of stack them and they kind of overlap a little bit, then you want to use the one that gives better risk reward. And lastly, we're only going to use fresh supply and demand zones. So it's already kind of been tapped into, we're not gonna use those zones. For higher probability setups, you can use kind of look at the higher time frame, but as we found in the optimization video, it might make more sense to just optimize for each asset, like what is the best risk reward to use for The strategy, I think in the optimization video, we were using 2R or 4R trades, and we found out that 4R was probably the best for ES. Again, small enough sample size, you would want to test that on higher time frames as well. When I've been testing the Dow, it seems like the 3R might be kind of the sweet spot for the Dow. So you can identify high time frame trend, but if it's simpler for you just to kind of identify the zones and then optimize after, that also works. We're going to specifically be using supply and demand zones during this kind of window of opportunity between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. Eastern. There are other zones that will work, but this is like the highest probability, so we're going to kind of make sure we use that for our kind of A+ setups. And then again, kind of going back to, we want less than 6 candles in the supply and demand zones. If there's 3 or fewer, then that can be even higher probability, but I'm not going to require that for this. So it's probably easiest to visualize a few examples. So basically, I have a couple examples in the strategy PDF. You can see here we have kind of our window of opportunity marked out. We have a drop base rally here from a few candles that kind of had an indecision before price kind of moved to the upside. It's a little zoomed out, so it's hard to see, but I essentially put the demand zone at the kind of body high prior to this big impulsive kind of green candle to the upside. So this is our demand zone. And then essentially, when we came into the session this day, we waited for two things essentially. One, the Globex low was swept. So that's kind of our first criteria. And then all we're doing is putting a limit order on this demand zone. He uses certain fib retracement levels, negative 0.33, 2.33, 3.66, and 6.32 to basically, he uses like this 0.33 buffer essentially for his stop losses. And that worked really well on when we tested the ES. So I'll do that as well for the US30 today. And yeah, essentially we're gonna be targeting probably about 3R today, I think is what we'll kind of find a happy medium between 2R and 4R. And then maybe after the fact we can kind of optimize and make sure that's sufficient. But yeah, it's essentially just a limit order, expecting that these supply and demand zones will cause a reaction to the other side. And then vice versa on a short, we had a Globex high from the previous day. We had a previous supply zone in this case from that 8 to 11 window of opportunity from a previous day. Price came in and tagged it, so we had a limit order at this point, used the negative 0.33 for our stop loss. And I think in this example we were trading, we just did like a 2R, but again, it looks like it would have gone potentially to 4R as well. So I think for today, like I said, I did a little bit of testing before this on the Dow, and it seems like 3R may be like a sweet spot. So we'll be doing that today. In his his original rules, he would essentially use 4R target if it was in line with a high time trend, or 2R if it was against it, with stops kind of half the way. But just to simplify today, not make it as complicated, I'm just going to go with VIX 3R, and we'll go break even again halfway, kind of 1.5R to keep it simple. So yeah, with that, we'll go ahead and dive into the charts. So I'm going to do what I did previously, and I'm going to have you guys give me a month and a year to start testing this, and I'll just pick kind of a random point in time. Globex model. So we got 2023, and then somebody give me a month. 100,000. I like to use 100,000 balance just for simplicity. And again, if you are trading futures, you could also test this on YM. That's the futures comparison. They're highly correlated, but we'll test the CFD pair because Bernd predominantly trades on FTMO. So April 2023 is the period that we have from a user. So we'll go ahead and start at that point. And probably won't get through too much, but I'll get through as much as I can in the next, I guess, 45 minutes or so. So we've got our session created. It'll probably load the session that I was testing a little bit before. So I'm going to make a copy of this layout. Anytime you have a new session, I recommend creating a new copy of whatever layout you have so that you can clear all the drawings and make sure they're saved for your specific layout. So Bernd Globex 5-minute US30 stream. Got that saved. I'm going to clear all my drawings. Sorry, my camera's in the way. Use this delete, so I'll remove all the previous drawings that I have. So I have kind of a fresh chart at this point. And yeah, I think the only indicators I have for this, I have this session indicator New York by FX Replay, and I have the quote-unquote London session. It's really just the Globex period that I have basically from 1800, so basically 6 p.m. Eastern till 9:30 the next day. So that's going to be our kind of Globex period. And then for New York, I'm actually, yeah, we have our 8 to 11 window Eastern time. That's going to be kind of our window of opportunity. and I've added those lines to kind of easily show. So that's really the only indicator we need for this. Everything else we're just going to be kind of drawing ourselves. So before we get into this, I do need to kind of go back and maybe identify some previous, it looks like we're in uptrend, so we're going to probably have quite a few demand zones on the way up. So before we get into this specific session, I will kind of start drawing some of those out. So we have potentially a couple different zones here. We have rally, base, rally, but then it kind of is already tested, so I wouldn't use this initial zone. I'll probably end up using this one right here. We have kind of two indecisive candles before price moved to the upside, and we didn't really get much of a reaction off that. So I like to use, honestly, I've been using the parallel channel for this because it's really easy to drag to the right, and you can kind of use a template if you go into the settings. If you change, the colors or anything like that, you can use these like save as, and I have basically two templates for demand and supply. And so that's what I've been using. It also shows the midpoint. So if you're optimizing and you want to use that midpoint later, that's a good level to use. And then another pro tip, the shift key helps you make sure you basically, it keeps it flat as you drag it across the screen. So that's another tip. So that looks like probably the first zone that we are going to want to consider. Nothing in this window right here that hasn't already been tested. It looks like we may have a zone here, but it's a little bit after the New York session. But yeah, I think this one would probably already have been tested because the high would have been right here, and we already kind of tapped into that. So unfortunately, this wouldn't be a fresh zone, so I'm not going to use that one. Coming down here, looks like we have one from a while back, and every now and then there's a zone created like right after this 8 to 11 window, and I found out like these are usually also pretty decent to use. So we basically have kind of 4 indecisive candles here, and I'll zoom in so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Indecisive candles are generally like kind of lot of wicks, and like the closes in particular aren't very clear. So I would really say like we have our kind of demand low right here, and then the first candle that really kind of took off decisively was this one right here. So this is probably this zone. It's probably what I would mark out. We did have one down here, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, too many candles. So this is like more than 6 candles. I wouldn't use this one. So that will be kind of another level that we'll use. So you kind of just have to drag these out for a while until they get tapped, or if the price tags them like during the Globex session, then they're kind of invalid. But we got a couple levels there. Let's see, do we have anything more? I may need to extend. Oh no, there we go. It just took a little bit to load. That's probably it, because we have some other levels here, but they've already been tapped into, and then we were in a previous downtrend. So just make sure there's no, it looks like we've already kind of tapped into these prior levels as well. So I think it's really just these couple demand zones that we have based on the historical levels. So that's all we need to kind of start out. And then it looks like I started this session a little bit before New York took place. So let me actually make sure I have this set correctly, because yeah, I'll just start basically at this point, and we'll go forward from here. So it doesn't look like there's going to be any trades on this day unless we come kind of down here to the low. I'm not going to be marking these out just for like efficiency, but obviously like in the examples, you really need to make sure that price kind of either for a short, you need to make sure it gets above the Globex high, or for a long, it needs to get above, or sorry, a long needs to get below the Globex low. So I have these like if we want to reference for some trades, but as I'm like more efficiently backtesting, I'm not going to be drawing these like on every single trade. I'm more, I care more about like catching these supply and demand zones, and then just like waiting for time that kind of taps into them. So let me make sure I have my New York session set correctly, 9:30 the next day. That's what we want. And I'm going to try and just kind of start going through this a little bit quickly to kind of show you guys how I would test this myself. So again, a little bit after the zone, but I will probably allow this one because it's pretty close to the New York zone, so the window of opportunity. So a couple indecisive candles here, and I'll use the body before we started getting some nice movement to the upside. That's another potential demand zone. And again, you over time have to kind of come back and drag these over. It's again, but yeah, the parallel channel is really nice because you can just grab it and drag it over very easily. So we do have a potential trade here if price ends up coming to this previous demand zone from the previous day. So let's just see if it does before I go to the next day. So we potentially have a trade here. And I'll show you the fib settings that we use for this. So I also have found that it's easier to just like put the fib like where the parallel channel is rather than all the way over here and then drag it over. It's just more efficient to kind of put it on the levels if it's close enough. So I'll show you guys the settings I have for this fib retracement. We have the negative 0.33, which is going to be our stop loss, 2.33, 3.66, 6.32, and then I also added this 4.99, which is essentially all this. These numbers just work out to eventually 1R, or sorry, 2R, 3R, and 4R. So these are basically the fib settings that we're using for the strategy. And again, I have this kind of saved out as a Bernd's fib template, and it's easy to just kind of see on the chart. So we potentially have a limit order here with a stop loss at this buffer. And again, just from testing, I was seeing like 3R was kind of a sweet spot for the Dow. So we'll stick with that for now. So we're using a buy limits with, sorry, I go through this pretty quickly, but buy limits, I like to use 1% of the initial balance. Nothing else you need to change except for this auto break even. We're going to go break even half the way, so 1.5R in this case. And let's see if we end up getting tagged in this trade. So we're in, and unfortunately this first one was a loss. But that is fine. It potentially, we did have a level actually down here. I need to make sure I recorded this correctly, so I might need to re-record this one. So we have this demand zone here that I think is valid, but now that I'm looking at this, we also have one a bit lower, and his rule is if there's zones right on top of each other, you need to use the one that has better risk to reward. So basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 candles exactly. So this is valid for kind of our setup before the impulsive move to the upside. So we make mistakes. That's why we have the replay feature. But I think this trade should have been recorded based on this zone, because what I basically do was like to consider if the zones are on top of each other. If you like basically copy and paste the previous zone, and if you stack it, like does it overlap with the other one? Then I would say they're kind of on top of each other. And so we should be using this lower demand zone because it gives us a better risk to reward. So let me replay back just a hair and we'll record this one. It could still be a loss, but I want to make sure I'm recording it with the proper rules in mind. So I'll adjust my fib retracement right here. I'll just grab a new one from the kind of low to the high. We'll use 3R in this case. Right there. And it's close enough. Not exactly, but again, we're just trying to relatively efficiently do this, so it doesn't have to be like exactly 3R. So save, and let's see if this would have yielded a different result. So we tapped in, and it was still a loss. But I'm glad we went back and recorded it correctly because we want to make sure we're sticking to the rules. And it was still a loss, but that's all good. So again, we won't have any trades until the next day, so I'm probably gonna go to the next session, and we still have this level down here that we're interested in. But now from this prior day, we also have potential supply zones that we can take a look at. So drop base drop here. Let me see how many candles this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 again before it kind of took to downside. So I'll use the lowest body close, and this is a pretty big zone. And so I like to use the templates. So this is supply. It's a bit larger than I would like. There was one a little bit lower. Actually, now that I'm talking this again, we have kind of the same situation here. That I would say this is a rally-based drop just above it. So I'm gonna use this one up here instead, because since they're on top of each other. So this one was like 4 candles. The lowest, this is a super tiny zone. So it'll give us a great risk to reward, but maybe a little lower probability setup right there. So we have a supply zone above and a demand zone not too far below. Could be a trade on this day. Let's kind of see how it plays out. And we may not visit either of them, that's fine. But essentially, if you're trading the strategy, you would kind of just set limit order down here, limit order up here, and just kind of wait and see if it hits. But yeah, there's probably no trades on this day. Haven't tagged either of them yet, so we could still potentially look for them. We now have a new demand zone down here, but this is probably too many candles. Yeah, we really didn't like take off until this candle up here, and this was like 10 candles or so that we were kind of deciding whether or not we wanted to respect this fair value gap or not. So I probably would say I'll usually just kind of make a mark right here, more than 6 candles, to show like why I didn't put a demand zone right here. But as you can see, just like again, kind of reiterating what I'm saying. Price didn't really decisively take off until this kind of green candle right here, and we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 candles. So there's a lot of orders that were being filled before this. So that's kind of, and one of the reasons we won't use those as a valid demand zone. So again, we can kind of see if price tags either of these levels, we may have a trade. It looks like that zone would have worked. But sticking to the rules, I'm not going to use it as a zone. You could get cute with, saying, oh, it did actually kind of take off here, but this is a lot of the indecision. Like, we really didn't get decisive move to the upside until here. So even though this zone would have worked, we're going to try and stick to the mechanical rules, and, I wouldn't have recorded this one. And then, yeah, we're pretty much, we've got a little bit of time left. So we'll see if we get up there for the supply zone. Doesn't look like it. So going on to the next day. We still have our supply zone up here that hasn't been tapped, and we should have a new demand zone down here. So we have like 1, 2, 3, 4 candles right here before we move to the upside. So I'll put the demand zone at the lowest body. Probably these 3 candles right here are kind of a better interpretation. We were consolidating before we moved up. So I'm going to change this to demand. Drag it over, so we should have a trade this day. It's probably going to hit one of these. So let me see which way it kind of breaks out first. It's kind of just chopping around this day. Oh, this is a Sunday. I need to make sure I'm on Mondays. Okay. Yeah. So now we're in Monday. So this is what we want. Yeah. And we have kind of overlapped. Sorry, that was a Friday. I guess I don't know if there was like a holiday or something, but didn't really get much price action that day. So this next day we have it doesn't happen super often, but we have this demand zone corresponding with the London low. And so these are also examples where we're not gonna we want to see a sweep of the Globex low, and there's not really much room for it to both sweep. It's already kind of been testing this zone, so unfortunately we won't be able to use this zone because it's kind of already been tested previously. So again, I'll kind of just make a note. Demand coincides with London or Globex low, pass on long, because we want to see the sweep into a fresh supplier demand zone. So we've got these kind of 2 levels up here we could potentially look at, and I'm going to make sure I grab this one from before so we have all of these for later. So only potential trades are if it comes down here or up here. Let's see if we get movement either of those directions. Starting to move up, but we've already gotten to the end of basically New York session, so it won't happen until the next day. All right, so this one is very, very close. Dang, we did barely tap into it. So again, I can't technically use this zone because it has already been tapped into. It got a fantastic reaction. Just unfortunately was outside of our trading session. So it, could provide a valid rule, but I'll say not fresh, supply zone, no short. We'll see if it plays out, but sticking to his rules, we got to make sure we're using fresh. Sorry, where is it? Yeah, fresh supply and demand zones that haven't already been tapped into. So we wouldn't use this one for valid setup. It probably would have wicked this out. It would have been past the 0.33 buffer. So again, this is kind of why we're only using them on that first attempt. That gave the really nice reaction. Unfortunately, it just wasn't during our trading session. So let's update levels here. We have a bit of consolidation here, but then we started to move up. I would say we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 candles here before we kind of resume the uptrend. So valid demand zone here. And I'm going to do this, go forward a little more efficient. Like when I backtest this, I go pretty quickly because I can pretty quickly see where the levels are and where we need to draw things. So if you guys need me to slow down at some point, let me know. But I'm going to show you guys how I would actually test this kind of in real time. So demand zone down here, potentially another one up here from these kind of 2 candles. And they're not right on top of each other. Actually, they are kind of right on top of each other. So let's kind of do the check real quick. If I stack these, they don't quite overlap. So I'm actually going to play both these. I might regret it, but they don't quite overlap when I stack them. So, and they're both during the window of opportunity. So I'll go ahead and play both of these potentially. So we'll drag everything out. And again, just to do this like efficiently, honestly, I'll just go to the next day and wait and see like, okay, we got to tap into that. So I'm going to come back and replay and record that trade. Like that's kind of how I will more efficiently record these. So we had a tap into this demand zone right here. And again, just to kind of show you guys visually again, we do also care that it is below the Globex low. So we need to make sure we have a sweep below the Globex low, which we got a little bit in this session. Put our fib right here, kind of at the high and low of this demand zone. Put our long position here with the stop loss at the 0.33 buffer. Again, we're just going to go for like 3R in these cases. You could potentially optimize as you get larger sample size, but that's kind of what I was saying might be a sweet spot for the Dow. So buy limit, auto break even after 1.5R. And let's let this play out. So we swept the glow, got tapped in, and really nice win. So this is how we want these to play out. Really nice reaction. And you know, there's not that many trades. As again, this is like why we are testing multiple assets. We've gone through several days, and this is likely only our second trade. But when you have multiple assets in play, you can kind of monitor a few at the same time, and you know, catch more trades over time from doing that. So really great reaction. This is a solid win. Potentially could have even got our 4R target in this case. Yep. But we're just gonna go again for like 3R just today because it's kind of a sweet spot. So yeah, got a question in the chats. So demand or supply is the order block inside the fair value gap. I would say mostly you're right. He just has kind of a little more specific how he draws it. You know, some people use the wicks, some people, so a lot of people in this case might just use like just this kind of the last green candle before move down, like that would kind of be the order block, I guess. But he uses kind of all of the indecisive candles. He counts those as his zones, and then he uses for supply zones the kind of lowest body, and for demand zones the highest body. But it's usually not just like a singular candle that he'll use. He'll use kind of any indecisive candles that have kind of wicks and aren't like closing, decisively one way or another. That's kind of where he will say it's prices, I guess he calls it like a base, essentially, just kind of consolidating a little bit before it decides which way it wants to go. So a little bit of a different definition than ICT or Doyle uses, but overall, like pretty similar, I would say. And so yeah, we could potentially still come up here for a long, or for a short, but yeah, we got a little bit of time left in the session, so I'll do the opposite and I'll place the order here, kind of based on this supply zone up here. Try and get it as close as I can. So I'll drag out the supply zone, put our entry as a limit order on a retest using the 0.33 fib as our stop, and this 4.99, it's basically a 3R level. Let's see if we get tagged into this one. 1.5R break even. Tagged in, and unfortunately it was a loss. And this is, again, I noticed this when I backtested the S&P. I think like another potentially good invalidation as you guys start backtesting this more and get a larger sample size is when a level gets like very like closely front ran. It doesn't technically tap into it, but it gets like front ran essentially, like very closely. It's almost the same as it already being tapped, because again, a lot of these orders that are like waiting here to get filled are already filled. And so these like specific cases may also be a reason you want to consider an invalidation. It's just kind of what I'm seeing. I haven't tested this more than a few months for the ES and just a couple months for the Dow, but it's just kind of another observation that I'm seeing that you may want to also consider as an invalidation. So something to think about going forward. So I've got another zone here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 candles, but this is kind of right on top of this zone below. So I'm not going to use this zone right here, but we potentially have one right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 candles. Probably. We did have a decisive candle, so I think I'd probably go ahead and use this zone right here. So rally base rally essentially was what this would be. So this would be, templates, demand. So few levels if we get a move to the downside that we could look for reactions off of. And again, just for efficiency, I'll kind of just play forward and see did that level get tapped into or not, rather than kind of playing the candles forward. Sorry. Go to next session, and when we did get a test of that, it looks like may have been a loss. We'll see if it played out. I think this actually would have been a live trade. So as you can see, we have kind of swept the Globex low, which is kind of the first requirement for the strategy. We're coming into a demand zone down here, so we can kind of place our fib level off it to look for our levels. Limit order there, stop loss at the 0.33 buffer. Just going for 3R for these cases for simplicity. 1.5R will go break even. And I think this one took a while to play out, so I'm just actually going to use the go to trade closed option. So as the trade is open, there's a way for you to kind of go to position closed. And it took a little bit, but the trade did end up closing. So again, this is kind of another way to more efficiently kind of close the trades. Looks like it almost got above our 1.5R break even, but not quite. It went break even and then ran to our take profit. So yeah, nice win this day. So I got a question in the chat about the strategy document. If you scroll up in the chat just a little bit, there's a link in the FX Replay Discord. And then also, if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be in the description. You guys, it's totally free. You just like put in your email, and then it'll shoot you an email with a PDF, so you can just grab it that way. So we're waiting for the next New York session at this point. Let's see, did we get any fresh levels from those previous days? Looks like we may have a demand or supply zone from this rally-based drop. So kind of 4 indecisive candles before we got a nice move to the downside. And yeah, I would say this zone up here has already kind of been tapped into, so I'm not going to use this supply zone from here. I'll use this more recent one. So the lowest body before we move to the downside. I'll change this template to supply. I'm getting better with my supply and demand than when I first started doing these streams. Okay, so we've got a potential short opportunity down there. It would have to come quite a ways down to tap into these demand zones down here. So we'll see if we get any trades this day. Yeah, thanks Ryan for joining. I'll catch you later, man. All right, so let's see if we get any trades this next day. Again, just for efficiency, I like to just go to the next session and see. There was no tap into this demand zone during New York session, so ended up hitting this level during the Globex hours, which he does not, typically trade during for the strategy. So unfortunately, this zone is kind of null and void at this point, but we still have valid demand zones a little bit lower. So probably no trades this day, just looking at where the price is and where it would need to go to tag us in. We still have a couple levels down here we can drag over. Sorry, I'll make my screen a little bigger so you guys can see better. Shout out to the FX Replay design team to maximize this space. They heard some feedback that one of the UI updates reduced space a little bit, but then very quickly updated it. So hopefully you guys like, it's pretty much similar to TradingView now. You have kind of the most chart space possible and can just use this nav bar option to either go back or, change light mode, dark mode, etc. So shout out to the design team for that. So probably no new zones from this previous day. We've kind of already tapped into both the supply and demand zones from this session. And this is another good example where there was a supply zone created during New York session that we did end up testing and respecting, but since it wasn't also a sweep of the Globex high, this is not an area that we would have wanted to short, just like following this strategy rules. But it shows you that it can play out outside of these very mechanical rules. It's just we're going to stick to the most high probability setups for today. So we still have not come into either of these levels, not really any new zones from the previous day. So we'll see if any trades, there weren't no trades from that day, no new levels. So again, we're literally just kind of waiting to see if there's any new levels or any taps into these zones. Otherwise, just kind of playing things forward. And this is why this strategy is simple enough that you could very well monitor multiple assets with it. We potentially have a trade here. So we have a zone that hasn't been tested. However, it's another case where it probably got front ran. So I think I'm actually going to skip this one, just kind of based on the observation we saw earlier, that when these levels are front run, they can be lower probability. And also this we've already tapped into it to start the New York session, so there's usually added volatility when New York opens as well. So for all of those reasons, I'm personally gonna skip this one. We'll see if it was a good or bad decision. It looks like it was probably a good decision because we did, in fact, we would have gotten wicked out beyond that 0.33 buffer. So again, I do think that is probably more often than not, if you see a level get barely front run, you probably want to not use it, as we saw in that previous loss we recorded. And again, right here, it would have been a loss. Just makes it lower probability because there are orders sitting here waited to be filled. And if there's too many, it'll just kind of front run it instead of actually tapping into it. But yeah, actually during this New York day, if we would have tapped in here, no, we would have been below the Globex high. So this wouldn't have been a valid trade on the previous day either. So we'll go to the next session. Again, just kind of waiting to see. Oops, I went too far. So it looks like we would have had a trade here. Let me come back and we'll replay this one. Looks like it's probably a loss, but we'll go ahead and record it so our analytics is accurate. All right. So let's make sure our zones are updated from everything we've seen. There's not really any new zones here. Probably a new zone here again. It's slightly after the New York session, but I would say we have kind of two indecisive candles before we move down, like just after the window of opportunity that I'll probably go ahead and include because it's close enough, and it does kind of overlap with these previous ones as well. So we did have a trade down here. Again, I'm pretty sure this one's going to be a loss from what we saw, but we want to make sure and record it so our analytics is as accurate as possible. So put the fib on the zone. Stop loss of the negative 0.33. We're just going to target out 3R in this case. We'll go break even at 1.5R, basically halfway there. And play this one out. So we got tacked in, and unfortunately, I just wicked this out a little bit past our stop loss. So had a loss on this session. Still up about 3R since we started. So overall, slowly growing the accounts, but nothing crazy. I think Bernd, and I've mentioned this in the chat, from watching all the videos from Bernd, he said any edge that gives you at least 2R per month is like the minimum that you want to look for, and anything obviously above that is great. But he said like that's kind of the minimum threshold. You want to at least be getting 2R a month from an edge for it to be viable. But on the flip side, the more profitable a strategy is, the more grace it gives you if you miss wins. Some strategies, if you miss a single winning trade in a month, it can really mess up your results. So a more profitable strategy allows you to maybe miss a few trades. We're human. We're going to miss some trades. So that is also another consideration to think about. So 2 potential trades this day. Again, just for efficiency, I'm going to play forward and see. We tapped into this one right here. So I can see we're going to have a trade right here. And I'm not like, and I know people, you get a lot of people think that like using the replay feature is cheating. And I would say it could be if like I was seeing a trade and then like, oh, it would have done this, let me revise my supply and demand level outside of the rules. Like, yes, that you don't want to do that. But sometimes if you play forward just to see like, would there have been a trade, it can be more efficient than like playing the candles on every single day. So that's why for this strategy in particular, that's often like what I will do. So we had a trade right here. We have this demand zone from our previous day. Put the fib there, put our long position on a retest. 0.33 as our stop, targeting out 3R. Place the order. We'll go break even after 1.5R. And this one might have been break even. We get tagged in. We're break even now. And yep, came back break even. So this would have been a break even trade using the specific rules that we have today. Again, this is like a great example of why optimizations are so important to really find out like what is the best risk to reward to use. If we were targeting 4R, it also would have been a break-even trade because it got over 2R. If we were going for 2R, we would have collected 2R. But again, all the 3R wins we'd have previously, we would have collected 1R less. So that's really why optimizations are kind of super important for each asset you're testing, because how one asset works specifically may not be kind of how another one works. Yeah, so break-even trade on this day. Did get a nice reaction, just didn't quite get to the target we wanted. Let me just double check that I had my zone accurately set up because I want to make sure that, again, we follow everything correctly. Yeah, we had consolidation here. I used the highest body. These are pretty large candles, but ultimately like indecision up down kind of before we got the move to the upside. So I think the zone it was valid. It was just, a little bit larger that unfortunately made it so that we didn't quite get to our take profit for this specific trade. So let's make sure we have one demand zone left down here from quite a while ago. Oh yeah, one more down here too. So just make sure you keep dragging these over so you keep them current. And then we've got, I think this is the only supply zone that's still live. So we'll go to the next session. Let me just, make sure there weren't any new zones from that previous day. I think there was one. So we had a drop-based drop here, but I can already see that's actually why this trade didn't run to our take profit, is we came into this supply zone and rejected. So unfortunately, the strategies worked against us in that case. But yeah, so no new zones from the previous day. All right, we got another trade up here, so I'll go ahead and replay just before, and we'll record this one. All right. So as you guys can see, we had a sweep above this Globex high from the previous kind of overnight session. I like to use these templates for kind of outlining the highs and lows. We have a supply zone up here from previous day, and again, it's just outside of the kind of 8 to 11 window of opportunity, but I generally am finding that you can use those if it's within like 30 minutes or something after that window of opportunity, and very clear supply zone, still kind of valid. So we'll put our fib on the kind of low to the high of this zone using the 0.33 as our stop loss. I'm just going to go ahead and target out 3R in this case. Don't have my levels quite right. Let me see. There's 3R. So it's a sell limit. I'll go auto break even after 1.5R, basically halfway towards my take profits. And we'll see how this one played out. So we got break even stops now. It's kind of overnights, a little lower volume, but yeah, you just kind of let it play out, and it's either going to be break even or a win at this point. Yeah, this one's taking a while. Nice. Eventually you take profit. So yeah, this one worked great. Just took a little while to play out, and yeah, good simple trade management. And Bernd is also he preaches this: the simpler your trade management, the better. So you can kind of just let the trades play out, and let the probabilities from your edge play out over time, rather than getting super intense with your trade management. I mean, some trades we do have a break point at which we will go break even. But after that, you kind of just let it play out. You don't need to, do anything else outside of that. So yeah, we've had a couple wins this month. So nice reaction again off the demand or supply zone, and we got a nice win. Would have also gone to the 4R take profit. So again, optimize this and see what works best. But 3R I think may be a sweet spot for the Dow. So that's just like what I'm using today based on some testing that I've done. I don't think we had any new zones. Actually, we have another demand zone down here. So drop base rally. Really only a couple candles here. I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can see as I draw this. So a pretty clean move down into this. Just a couple, really honestly, just a singular candle that created potentially this one right before it. There was like a decent wick above it as well. So I'll go ahead and use these two candles as my kind of indecision before we got to move to the upside. So I'll change this template to demand. So don't believe we have any supply zones hanging over, but we do have some demand zones. So I'll go to the next session, see if any of those get tagged. Not on this day. See if there's any new zones. More than 6 candles here, can pretty easily see. So I'm not going to be marking out a zone here. More than 6 candles. And we do have one potentially here. I'll probably say this singular candle would be another demand zone we can use before kind of price moved up to the upside. And so yeah, I got a question in the chat from Robert. Does news factor in this strategy? Generally, I think I'm trying to even think what we said about news. I have to actually look in the PDF. Yeah, there was no consideration for news when he specifically went over. I believe when I tested this myself, like on the ES over large sample size, it's pretty similar with like most strategies that you'll trade. unless you're trading like super low time frames, then like pretty much any news can be too volatile. But usually like the biggest news that I'll avoid during New York session is CPI, FOMC, non-farm payroll. FOMC usually has like the statistics release as well as like the Q&A. So both of those can be like super volatile. But outside of that, like there's, and like both CPI and non-farm payroll actually like are pre-market in New York. So there's really not too many high impact news events during New York session that I usually like will avoid. Oftentimes around like I think it's around like 10 a.m. Eastern, there's like PPI or consumer sentiment index, things like that. And usually I found that like the technical analysis that you have, generally plays out more often than not. And maybe that little surge of liquidity can actually help tap you into your levels. So I really try to avoid those like really high impact ones, but outside of that, like I usually am okay with some of the other ones, even if it says high impact. I'll generally like play with those most of the time. So that's what I've been doing when I've been testing this as well. So I got a question from Sariel. Can your fib be set with 1.382, 1.681? So I'll go over the fib levels again real quick. So the main reason that we have these kind of unique levels is based on this negative 0.33 buffer. So as I draw this fib on the chart from kind of the entry point to the other side of it, you can kind of see this negative 0.3 is going to be our stop loss. And so these levels are basically just multiples of 1.33 after the kind of starts coming to your upside. So 2.33 will be kind of your initial, I think this is like the 1 hour level. 3.66 is going to be your 2 hour level. 4.99 is going to be your 3 hour level, and then 6.32 is 4 hour. So it's just a way to help you easily visualize where should my stop be and where should my take profit be. Just helps you like very easily see kind of where you need to put your position tool on the charts. But yeah, just to go back into settings, I have negative 0.33, 0, 1, 2.33, 3.66, 4.99, and 6.32. So that's the kind of the levels that he has for this strategy specifically. And then yeah, once you're done, again, as I had mentioned, you can kind of come in, make sure you select the fib tool, come to the settings, and then after you update this how you want, I think I just use one color, and I turn the opacity on the background all the way down to 0. So it's really clean. You can pretty much only see the levels you want. I don't care about the prices or anything like that for this. So once you have it set, just save as, and you can save it as a template so that you can use it in the future. So hopefully that answered your question. All right. So no trades the previous day, no new zones from that 8 to 11 window. Again, there's potential supply zone up here, but it was pretty far after that 8 to 11 window, so I'm not going to mark anything out there. So we do have a zone here. It's a pretty big zone, which again makes this pretty low probability because we would have to get a pretty large move to hit our take profits. But I do think this is probably a valid zone. Let me just double check. Drop base rally. We had kind of one indecisive candle. In this case, this pretty much is an order block. Basically the last red candle before we move to the upside. So we'll give it a shot. It may be a little lower probability because it is such a big zone, but nonetheless, we'll record it if it meets the rules of the strategy. So stop loss at the 0.33, targeting 3R, which is all the way up here. Make sure I have my entry rates. So pretty confident the Globex low will be swept. So we'll go ahead and just put this trade, assuming it's going to get tagged. 1.5 is going to be our break even, basically halfway to our take profit. So we got tagged in, and unfortunately, yeah, quick loss. Large zone, but also, yeah, just didn't really get a huge reaction to this. Generally, you will see like these initial supply and demand zones, but like kind of at the start of these big moves are going to be better than kind of the ones along the way. So that again could potentially be something to optimize and only pick like the higher probability zones. Again, I couldn't draw this one out because there's more than 6 candles, but I have seen, and like Bernd, I think even said it himself, that like the initial zones that started the entire move have like higher strength than the ones that are like kind of during the move itself. But we recorded it because it met the rules otherwise, and it just unfortunately was a loss. So could potentially have another trade here. I'll just go play a few candles forward and see if we get tagged into this next one. Yes, we did. So I might need to play back if it doesn't come back and revisit, but we have another demand zone down here that we've now tapped into, and this one's actually getting a little bit of reaction. I should have recorded it here, but we'll assume it's going to come back and tag us in. I'll put a limit order here. So put my fibs on the charts. Stop loss negative 0.33. Going to go and target 3R. About there. Place order, buy limit, break even after 1.5R. So we did get tagged in. We're break even now, and nice win. So yeah, first level didn't work, but this next level worked really well. It's ended up tagging us in. Kind of, you can see the wicks into it. That's, kind of shows confidence. But with this strategy, we're just using limit orders. So we don't really care necessarily what the candles do. We just, are expecting a reaction off of it and hoping to catch that move. So got a nice move to the upside. So it's been about an hour. We'll go ahead and take a look at some analytics here. The analytics button has now been moved down here. It was up here previously, but it's, doesn't necessarily need to be in this floating bar. So we just kind of dropped it down here. So we can click this to go to the analytics. And honestly, a pretty nice equity curve. I believe when we tested this on the ES, maybe the win rate was a little bit higher. I think I was seeing maybe closer to 60% for ES, but 50% win rate with average of 3R is great. Like honestly, 50% with anything over 2R will give you a great equity curve over time. So we collected about 8R in, what was this, from April 4th to, yeah, basically like a full month. We got about 8R in a month with a 50% win rate, average risk reward of 3R. So pretty promising strategy. Again, any strategy that you plan to trade yourself, I recommend getting 100, 200 trade sample size to make sure that you have reliable data, over those larger sample sizes. But just from initial backtest, like it looks like, not surprisingly, you could probably trade the Dow in addition to the S&P for this Globex strategy. I mean, Bernd said it works on pretty much any indices. That would be the S&P, the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ, I'm curious to actually see how the results are because it tends to be a little more volatile, and that 0.33 buffer might not be enough on the NASDAQ. So that would be maybe another thing we can test in the future to see if that would work. But at least for the S&P and the Dow, this strategy looks pretty promising and could be, you could potentially backtest both of those and trade both of those. And maybe, it doesn't give you that many trades. We only had about 9 trades in a month. So, not a ton of trades. But between the S&P and the NASDAQ, or sorry, between the S&P and the Dow, you could potentially have like, a dozen trades a month. So more days than not. But yeah, again, very low sample size, so not going to be a whole lot of insights from the rest of the analytics. But the main thing I want to see when I start these back tests, after I get, 20, 30 trades, am I seeing a reasonable equity curve? Am I seeing, something that looks to be profitable? If I'm seeing a strategy that is flat or, really low win rates, then maybe I'll switch to some other strategy. But yeah, we know Bernd is one of the top traders with FTMO, so not surprisingly, this strategy looked to work pretty well. So I'll be in the Discord if you guys have any other questions as you're backtesting it. If you're wondering if a certain setup is valid, happy to help, take a look. Or, if you guys start backtesting this with larger sample size, definitely feel free to share. I'm curious to see what it looks like over a larger sample size. But yeah, with that, we'll wrap it up, and hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you guys later.